Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of One Chord a Week. Today's chord is such a beautiful sounding chord, and the reason I want to show it to you is because we talked a little bit lately about extension for chords and how some extensions are not possible in certain chords. And so this will give you kind of the opposite example where one extension that wasn't possible on a previous chord is now available for us for a really cool sound. So let's begin. Today I will show you the minor 11th chord. It's a very rich chord, it sounds very sophisticated, but also kind of mysterious and open and full of harmonic possibilities and melodic possibilities. It's a chord I really like, and it sounds rich but not overwhelming, especially when you drop maybe a couple of notes, which we'll look at later. And you'll see this chord pretty much anywhere. You can use it in all styles of music. And sometimes you'll see it as an actual chord, and sometimes you'll see it as a sound. So we talked about this a little bit before, where maybe you have a very complex chord, and it's very important that you know the chord, but then you don't have to actually play it 100% on one instrument. So you could have maybe just a simple minor chord in the harmony, and then have other instruments just focusing on the extensions, in this case the 11th or the 9th, or it can be the 13th, it can be anything. So even if you learn these very complex chords and they might not fit your specific style, it's still very beneficial to know them. As a matter of fact, as I always say, I play rock music, and sometimes I'm slave to the distortion, and so distortion kind of precludes me from certain chords on certain styles of tracks. But even then, the vocabulary I have of chords really helps me out when it comes to arranging, when it comes to setting up a melody, when it comes to setting up a feel or an emotion, because I know how to pick certain notes that together with the rest of the track will give me the feel of a chord that might be beyond my possibilities. All right, so no matter what your style is, all these chords are extremely useful. So don't fall into the trap that I fell into when I started out, saying, well, I don't play jazz, I don't need all these chords. Well, actually I figured out later that yes, I do, because otherwise my improvisations and my melodies, they all kind of feel stagnant, because I'm always revolving around sounds that I know, and those sounds tend to be in the beginning major, minor, power chords and all the stuff we all use when we're starting out. So chords are extremely important, but that has nothing to do with this chord today. So let's begin with the formula for the minor 11th chord. So the basis for the minor 11th chord, of course, is the minor triad. Here's a link to the minor triad. If you want to start out from there, you can check it out. And of course, the first three notes we have in a minor triad are the root, in this case is C, then we have the minor third E flat, and the perfect fifth G. That's very simple, the first starting point. Then, because it's called minor 11th, we know that it's a 7th chord, so it's a minor 7th chord, right? And so we would have the minor third, the minor triad we just talked about, plus a minor 7th. So we have the minor triad plus a B flat, because the minor 7th, if you remember, is found one whole step below the root. So from C, one whole step is B flat. So up until now, we basically are at a minor 7th chord. Again, you should watch that video if you're not clear about minor 7th chords. They're extremely important and the starting point for a lot of chords. Okay, so this is our 4-note starting point. Now, on top of this, we add the extensions. And technically speaking, the minor 11th chord has 9th and an 11th. So on top of this, we would add a D, which is the 9th, which is one whole step above the root, from C to D. Yes. And also the 11th. The 11th is the same as a perfect 4th, so that will be F, okay? Root, minor 3rd, perfect 5th, minor 7th, and the extensions 9th and 11th, which is a perfect 4th. All right, and the notes are C, E flat, G, B flat, D, F. It's a big formula, but as we'll see shortly, we're not going to use all these notes all the time. And there you go, the sound of the minor 11th chord is such a beautiful chord. And the first thing we should talk about is the fact that now we have an available 11th as an extension. If you remember when we looked at the major 13th chord, I think it was, here's a link to that. We discussed how certain extensions are not used or are dropped because they don't sound right over certain chords. And one of the rules of extensions is that you shouldn't use an extension, by extension I mean the 9th, the 11th, and the 13th. We shouldn't use an extension that sits 1/2 step above a note of the triad, okay? In the case of C major 13th, we had the major triad, which is C, E, and G, and then we have the F as the 11th. Now that F is 1/2 step above the E, that is the third of the triad. And so that half step sounds wrong, and it sounds very harmonically, it kind of sounds a bit obnoxious. And so there's all kinds of solutions to it. We drop certain notes, we raise the 11th, which we've seen in another video, the major 7th sharp 11th. But you know, it's beyond today's video. But what I mean is that depending on what chord you have, the extensions are sometimes forbidden, so to speak. You're free to use them, but they won't sound right. But now when we go to minor, the 11th becomes an available extension, because when you go to minor, the E becomes an E flat in the triad, and so the F now is a whole step above the E flat, not a half step. And then it becomes possible to use it, it becomes available, and it sounds great. So one of the first things I would do is to play the chord, make a drone of it on a synth or a loop or with the guitar, and just play on top of it. And we'll get into the scales later. I'll give you two very simple scales to play with this. And you really get a feel of that 11th really working. You know, the 11th really starts working the chord in a fantastic way. So this chord sounds really beautiful. The other thing is that we should talk about how many notes are in a chord like this. And this chord has 6 notes. We have the root, the minor third, the 5th, the minor 7th, the 9th, and the 11th. So 6 notes is a lot of notes. Even if you could play them on the guitar, you know, it's still a lot of notes, still a lot of harmonic content. It doesn't leave you much room for your melody to be significant, because it's basically resting on every note of the chord. And so usually we drop some notes. Now, I won't go into the whole detail again. Please make sure you watch all these videos to get a total, dropped my pick, a total view of this. But the idea here is that the 5th is a note that we can drop anytime, pretty much in any chord, or at least major and minor, not on the diminished and augmented. But the 5th we can drop. We could even drop the root, and we can drop the 9th. And to me, as a more modern, more rock guitar player, I'm kind of wary of losing the root sometimes. In jazz, it's kind of assumed that you can drop it, but for what we do, sometimes, you know, the guitar is doing something, the bass is kind of doing something else. I really want to establish a root center, so the root sometimes I tend to keep. The 5th I can drop, I don't mind, but what I drop usually is the 9th, okay? So of the extensions of this chord, which are the 9 and the 11th, the 9 can get dropped. I don't really miss the 9th in this chord, because I kind of shift the focus to the 11th. And if you look at, you know, chord books and chord dictionaries, you'll find that many times the 9th is omitted. You don't have to omit it, you can use it, but it makes it more manageable, and I think it shifts the attention more to the 11th, which I enjoy. So usually what I would play would be root, 3rd, maybe the 5th, and then 7th and 11th. And just in a couple of minutes, I'll show you 3 positions, and you'll see what I mean by that. It still sounds beautiful. And the other thing it does is it lets me manage the 9th. You see what I mean? I can decide, do I want to use the 9th or I don't want to use the 9th? If I want to use the 9th, I can use it in my melody and not impose it on the chord, and that gives me a bit more breathing room when I'm improvising or playing melodies. All right, so that's what I would say about the sound. Other than that, it's just a chord that can be used very simply if you are in a diatonic scale, which means a scale derived by the major scale, so all the major scales, the minor scales, and the diatonic modes, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and so on. You can use this chord in all of the minor chords, okay? All the minor chords in C major, for example, D minor, E minor, and A minor. These 3 chords are all minor 7th when you harmonize in 7th, and they all emit a 4th, so they all emit the 11th. If you don't drop the 9th though, you can only use this chord on the 2nd degree and on the 6th degree, not on the 3rd degree, because the 3rd degree will have a flat 9. Okay, so it can sound a bit more complicated than it really is, but let me just sum it up for you with a simple rule. If you want to use the 11th chord with all extensions, you can only use it on the 2nd degree of a major scale, the D, or the 6th degree, which is the A. If you are dropping the 9th, then you can use it on all 3 minor chords of a major scale. If instead of playing a major scale, you're playing a mode, be it a minor scale, be it a Dorian scale, or whatever it is, then you'd have to, of course, adjust to it. But the places where you can put them are the 2nd and 6th degree for all extensions, and the 2nd, 3rd, and 6th degree if you are dropping the 9th, because the 9th is where you would have a conflict on the 3rd degree, which is E minor in the case of C major, right? So that's how you would use it. And now I'm going to show you how to play it. All right, so let me show you how to play it across the fretboard. The first position is down here on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. And we play the root on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, then the minor 3rd E flat on the 1st fret of the 4th. And then we do need, for this kind of chord, we do need a minor 7th, which we'll find right here on the 3rd fret of the 3rd string, B flat. And then we can bar the top 2 strings, and that will give us on the 1st fret a C, which is a root again, and an F, which is our 11th. Okay, as you notice, we don't have a 5th, and we don't have a 9th, and it still sounds great. Now, just out of curiosity, if I want to add a 9th, because here I'm playing 2 roots, I have C here and C here, I could raise this C to D, and I would play like this. Not as easy to play, but still. Okay, so it doesn't sound bad, but it does kind of, to me, it kind of detracts a bit from the 11th. The 9th and the 11th together, it kind of confuses me a bit, but you can certainly play this if you want to play with a D. I think I enjoy more the sound, a bit leaner and cleaner without the 9th and just 11th. But I just wanted to show you this because I'm going to show you 2 more positions, and feel free to add the D or the 9th if you want. The next position is kind of fun because you've seen it when you tune your guitar, you're actually playing a minor 11th chord. And so we'll just move it up to C now, to the 8th fret, and if you look at it, you'd actually play C on the 8th fret of the 6th string. You have an F here, which is the 11th, on the same fret of the 5th. On the 4th, you have a B flat, which is our minor 7th. You have an E flat here, which is the minor 3rd. You have a G, which is the 5th, and then again a C. So if you look at it, you have C, E flat, G, that's a minor triad. We have the B flat, which makes it minor 7th, and then we have the F, which makes it minor 11th. So if you just play this, you're playing a minor 11th chord. Okay, it's not the most common fingering, but I thought it would be fun to share it with you. As you know, these 3 fingerings are not enough anyway. You should study a bit more, find a good chord dictionary and maybe learn 5 or 6 or 10 of each chord. But this is kind of fun and it's easy to remember. So if, in case you ever forget, it's good to have one you can go back to. All right, so this is actually a C minor 11th. For the last one, I'm going to give you a very small shape that is very useful if you're playing very rhythmic oriented music. Maybe you can use it in funk, you can use it, you know, in rock, and it's a fun chord. It sounds really cool, and it's kind of small and tiny, so you can fit it in pretty much anywhere. If you have a busy arrangement, you can use it and stuff like that. So it goes like this. We have the root on the 10th fret of the 4th string, that's C. Then we go down to the F on the 10th fret of the 3rd string, that's our 11th, and then we have the minor 7th B flat here on the 11th fret of the 2nd string, and then E flat, the minor 3rd, on the 11th fret of the 1st. Sounds really cool and useful. Now, what notes are we missing? Well, the ones we talked about earlier. We're missing the 5th, the G, and we're missing the 9th, D. Again, if you wanted to add these notes, you could add the G here, you could add the 9th here, or maybe switch it here, play an E here and a D there. You can certainly do it. But I find that, again, as I said, the 11 by itself, I think, is enough. But feel free to add the D whenever you want. The G maybe is not worth your troubles because it doesn't really add much, as we discussed before. When it comes to scales with complex chords or big chords like this, you have to look at it two ways. The first way is the one we're looking at today, which is have a scale that is 100% usable. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you have a lot of extensions like the 9th, 11th, we might drop the 9th from the chord, but it's still an intrinsic part of the formula of the chord. And so I'm wary of suggesting, especially to beginners, and I don't know your level, I can't know it because you're from all over the world of all different levels. And so it's a bit irresponsible for me to show you a scale that says, well, this scale could work as long as you don't play the 9th, you know? So, because we kind of agreed that the 9th is not necessary. And so usually with big chords, you should start with scales that agree 100% with the chord, with the whole formula. In this chord has 6 notes, the root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th. You should find a scale that works with all these notes. And then you can always think, well, if I'm playing this voicing without the 9th, I could use a scale that has an altered 9, and so on, all right? But today's scales will fit. And the first one, of course, is minor. And the minor scale is kind of fun because this chord is kind of sophisticated. And a minor scale is kind of minor. It's simple, it's a scale that you all know, we're used to the sound, but you see when you put it on top of this chord, the sophistication, so to speak, of this chord kind of, you know, rubs off onto the minor scale. And a careful use of the minor scale and how many notes you use, how fast you play, what kind of rhythm you use, it can really give you a different sound. See, you can give a very different sound of a scale that you're so familiar with. You know, you've used it 1,000 times, and this will really lift it up and bring it somewhere else. And so what I would do is, even though it's a simple scale, I would suggest you really explore playing over a minor 11th chord with a regular minor scale and see how it changes. If you want to compare it, you should play a little loop of just C minor, for example, the regular C minor, or C minor 7th, and play with the minor scale. And then switch to minor 11th and play the same scale. You see that it just takes on a different character. So it's very interesting. That's the first one I would suggest. Another scale that I would use for this chord would be Dorian. Again, a very simple scale. Dorian is a minor scale with a 6th that is rated a half step. And for Dorian, I would probably associate it with a more of a funky sound or a rock sound or, you know, a fusion sound. And it's a very beautiful scale because it's brighter instead of minor. So if I want something that's less meditative or it's more fun in a way, then I would probably switch to Dorian over. You hear that? It's a totally different sound. And the beautiful thing about this chord is that it kind of morphs according to what scale you play with. And even if it's the same scale, just what notes you are focusing on of the scale. And I think it's kind of similar to a lot of complex chords because they have so much information in them. But this is specifically because the 11th is a very ambiguous note. It sounds ambiguous. It sounds like you don't really know exactly where it's going. It could be here. It could even go. You know, the 4th is kind of like, or the 11th, which is the same thing. It's kind of like it's there, but it doesn't really know where it's going. So it knows where it is. It's a very strong interval, but it doesn't really know what's coming next. And so I find it beautiful, and I think these two scales will serve you very well. All right, so this is it for the minor 11th chord. I think I was a bit chatty today. I don't know why. I've maybe digressed a little bit, but I think you'll find it interesting. And sometimes I'm afraid of doing videos that are scripted. Of course, as you can tell, they're not. But sometimes I feel that at least a couple of times during this series to have it more of a conversation thing, because that's how I would transmit information to my actual students, for example. You know, sometimes you just go to a lesson and I will sit you down and we say, okay, well, let's see where you're at. And that will slowly and by itself generate new information that you can use. And those are the most useful lessons because they are very pertinent to what you're doing. So I can't tell exactly what it is you're doing out there, but I hope you enjoy this kind of videos where it's more of a conversation maybe rather than a lesson. And because we have so many videos already on this chord, I think once in a while we can afford just making it a little looser. And by the way, if you are interested in taking this a lot further, I have private lessons available online. I have students from all over the world, and there's a link down there, and you can just check it out if you want. Make sure you download the free ebook, 21 licks. It's totally free, no strings attached. I don't even need your email or anything. You just click on the link and you go to a Google Drive page and you download it. And you can share it with anyone you want, as long as you keep it the way it is. And that's it. I will see you next week with a very cool new chord. And we're kind of running out of them. As you can tell, we've been working really hard on chords, but there's still quite a few interesting sounds to be discovered. Okay? I will see you next week. Have a great week ahead of you. Play a lot of guitar and have fun.